Over a recent 22-day stretch, the United States spent $50 billion on military operations and lost 13 American lives in the Middle East. During those exact same 22 days, something else happened. In the city of Wuhan, autonomous vehicles completed 300,000 passenger rides. No weapons were fired, no congressional authorizations were debated, and the unit economics approached break-even. We are operating in a geopolitical landscape where it is entirely possible to win every isolated tactical firefight while simultaneously losing the broader century. A military engagement with no stated objective has no definition of victory, and a war with no definition of victory has no end. When a republic falls into this habit, it begins to confuse sheer financial expenditure with actual strategy. History keeps a very strict ledger on this specific geographic region. The Persians, Alexander's Macedonians, the British, and the Soviets all entered the Middle East, and all of them departed with broken treasuries. The cost of occupation always exceeded the value of the prize. This chart compares the financial trajectories of the world's two largest powers over the last 50 years. On one side, you can see the United States investing an estimated $40 trillion in today's money into Middle Eastern military engagements. On the other side, the nation Washington named as its primary competitor built the world's largest navy, deployed a massive artificial intelligence infrastructure, and accumulated a $1 trillion annual trade surplus. Because the U.S. became a net energy exporter in 2019, the oil flowing through the Persian Gulf today primarily goes to China. So the capital flows look like this. The United States borrows money from China through treasury bonds to fund military deployments that ultimately secure China's energy supply chain. Back in 1953, President Dwight D. Eisenhower, a five-star general and supreme Allied commander, warned that every warship launched and rocket fired acts as a direct theft from those who hunger and are not fed. He understood exactly what bullets cost and what the civilizations firing them sacrifice. When a decaying power stops listening to the men who know what victory actually costs, it starts overspending. It stops executing a coherent strategy and begins performing decadence in the key of patriotism. In October 1860, foreign troops burned the old summer palace in Beijing. The ruins were deliberately left unrestored to teach Chinese schoolchildren a foundational lesson of modern statecraft. Brilliance at invention means nothing if you lack the power to defend the harvest. A century and a half later, a Chinese hedge fund trained a frontier artificial intelligence model called DeepSeek. Frontier models are the most advanced, cutting-edge AI systems available. They did this for a mere $5.6 million in computing costs, even though strict American export controls were supposed to make it impossible. This map visualizes how Beijing approaches industrial strategy. They don't look at isolated sectors. They manage 13 specific compounding technological interdependencies, like electric vehicles, rare earth metals, and advanced batteries. And sitting right at the root, connecting all of them together, is artificial intelligence. When the United States imposes an export restriction, China doesn't treat it as a permanent setback. Internally, they file these sanctions under a different heading, a voluntary technology development incentive. One side of this geopolitical board is patiently cultivating thousands of specialized companies to build out a self-sufficient ecosystem. The other side is entirely distracted, carefully counting Tomahawk missiles and anxiously waiting for the next quarterly earnings report. To understand how that happened, you have to look inside the rooms where the decisions were made. In 2006, inside a marble-floored boardroom in Singapore, a group of consultants reviewed a plan to offshore 11,000 American manufacturing jobs to Shenzhen, China. The optimization roadmap was mathematically flawless. It promised incredible short-term cost savings. Every single head in the room nodded in agreement. Then, a junior analyst, barely 3 years out of business school, asked a question about the long-term consequence of handing over all that technical expertise. He asked, "What happens when they don't need us anymore?" 4 seconds passed, and someone changed the slide. 6 months later, an email arrived from Shanghai. The newly transferred facility was already beating the original factory's peak performance by 30%, at half the cost. The final line of the email stated they had learned everything we knew, improved upon it, and no longer required our technical support. The silence in that boardroom was about time horizons. By consistently choosing to optimize for the next financial quarter over the next century, American corporate culture engaged in a quiet, highly profitable form of civilizational self-sabotage. In the backwaters of Kerala, India, there is a distinct ecological layer called a halocline. It's an unstable boundary where freshwater and saltwater meet but do not mix. The richest biological harvest exists exactly in that space between the two currents. Modern geopolitics has its own halocline. America's institutions are floating above the line, optimizing for the surface, obsessing over cable news narratives and quarterly earnings calls. Meanwhile, China is operating below the line, optimizing for the actual harvest, building industrial output, and graduating over 3 million STEM students, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, in a single year. You can see the result of surface-level thinking in military procurement. The F-35 Lightning II fighter jet has an estimated life cycle cost of $1.7 trillion, yet each airframe requires over 900 pounds of rare earth materials sourced primarily from the exact nation the jet is designed to deter. Contrast that massive expense with a modern drone swarm. 2,000 autonomous units at $500 each cost just $1 million total. That swarm can easily exhaust a $2 billion naval destroyer's entire magazine of interceptor missiles and still leave hundreds of drones airborne. When a power repeatedly produces weapon systems whose cost and complexity outgrow the actual strategic environment, it is no longer building a functional fleet. It is building beautiful canoes, vessels so exquisite and expensive that they can barely float in a real conflict. The reality we have to face is that the United States has not been outspent by its rival. We have been outpatienced, and patience can be learned. We know this because we have done it before. The GI Bill, which provided education and housing benefits to returning World War II veterans, returned $7 to the economy for every $1 invested, effectively building the American middle class. Or consider the interstate highway system. That was a patient, generational, deployment-focused investment that physically connected an entire continent and allowed domestic commerce to compound for decades. Turning the bow of this ship is still entirely possible. It is a quiet maneuver, but it requires acknowledging that the water has changed. We have to stop funding short-term strategic theater and start deploying long-term, applied capital. The breathing of the performer has changed, and the undercurrent is shifting fast. To understand exactly how these two currents are moving, and to read the specific Rooseveltian prescription required to secure this century, check out the full analytical framework in the essay linked below.